Hit record before I forget. Cool. So I think everyone should have received an email inviting you to the test flight. And
if you gave us our email, right?
Yeah. If you gave it to us. I don't know if it's too late to add people, but maybe we can add people after people want to play around with it.
We can do it after, yeah, for sure.
Yeah. And if anyone is on Android, does that impact them with the test flight?
Yeah, they won't be able to test it on test flight because that's an iOS only thing. But I can build after that. They can sideload into Android. I'm using Android myself, so we can provide stuff after the call.
Cool.
We can also probably provide the shared project URL, right, George? And they can mess around with it in like our simulator webpage. Does that work? In theory, right?
What do you mean, like in Draftbit?
I mean the shared project URL, the unique landing page with the simulator.
Absolutely, we can show that. Yeah.
Cool.
Awesome. Got to take care of our green text friends out there.
Yeah, green bubbles.
That's what we called. Oh, damn it.
Rooting group chats for the last several years. Just kidding.
But not really.
Yeah, not really. My family is like, it's like 9 of us in a group chat and one person has an Android, and it's just, we give her a hard time all the time because like someone sends a video and no one can see it because it's like this big.
Yeah.
So such is life.
Yep.
All right, let's give it one more minute. There's Ben. All right, hey Ben.
Apologies for being late.
Hey Ben.
Hey Nick, how's it going?
Long time no see, man.
I know.
All right.
Congrats on your wedding, by the way.
Which one? I had 2.
What? Oh, that's you called it after your one wedding as well.
We did it in the UK and then did it abroad as a fake, as a sham wedding. But yeah.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yes.
Well, congratulations on both.
All right. Well, we'll get started and I'll continue to let people in as they pop up. But welcome to our session on Draftbit. We're going to get into building mobile apps in the next few days with our first showcase on Tuesday for mobile apps. We have Nick and George here today, and I'll let Nick and George introduce themselves and then we'll get started.
Cool. Well, I'm Nick. I'm the head of growth at Draftbit, and George.
Sorry, I was sending a link for the people who didn't get a chance to do the test flight stuff, so I was not paying that much attention. But I'm George. I'm the head of product at Draftbit.
Awesome.
So
go ahead,
Amy.
I'm just going to ask a few questions for those that aren't familiar with Draftbit. Can you give us a little like 1-sentence explanation of like what Draftbit is, and maybe you can dive into kind of what market problem you're solving when it comes to mobile apps, and what makes Draftbit kind of a powerful tool in this space.
Sure. Yeah, so at Draftbit, we kind of call ourselves the pro code, no code mobile app builder. You can also think about us as like the Webflow for mobile apps. So when you're building in Draftbit, what you're really doing, what we strive to allow you to do, is build production grade native mobile apps. So you're constructing apps that have real source code that's 100% based on open source languages and libraries. It's developer friendly, it's powerful, it's customizable. We give you access to the ability to inject your own code into Draftbit. And so I know it's like a little bit, you're going to see today what we mean by some of this stuff, because I know it's like a little bit jarring. You guys, are doing a no code cohort, and what are these guys talking about with code? But really, I think what Draftbit strives to do is let no coders and low coders build real production grade, scalable, secure mobile apps, the type of apps that you would see at the top of an app store chart.
And I think one thing that's really cool about Draftbit is, and maybe this is a minor detail to some, but one that I find when I'm exploring mobile app builders is people wanting to know if they can have access to like the source code. And that's something that you guys provide is as you're building it, you're also building out like production ready source code as well, which really speaks to the ability to, I feel like some people start off with tools and it might get them through like the first growth phase of an idea, but with how Draftbit is set up, you can kind of run with it for a while and maybe forever. Yeah. You wanted to?
Potentially, yes.
Yeah. And I guess what are a few things that people need to know about Draftbit before they get started?
Yeah, I think, you know, we get asked a lot, like, how does Draftbit compare to other mobile app builders in the no code space? And I'll leave it to, you know, the gallery here to judge, but I think that we see most folks graduating from other no code tools to Draftbit. And so I don't think about Draftbit as a replacement for a Glide or an Adalo. I think about it as like a step in an app product entrepreneur's journey. So besides a lot of the code stuff, I think, you know, things you should know about Draftbit. Draftbit's built for teams. We often have non-technical and technical folks collaborating on stuff inside of Draftbit. And, you know, I think a lot of the other stuff that we would want you to know about Draftbit, we'll just kind of let you see for yourself during this talk today. So yeah, do you have other questions, Amy, or we could jump into it? I know folks are probably chomping at the bit.
Yeah, let's jump into it. I think this is really cool. You guys shared that you haven't done like a live build like this. We've never had a live build happen in a mobile app, so that's really cool. So thanks for taking the time to put this together for us. And if anyone has any questions, leave them in the chat and I'll try and either gather them for at the end, or I'll try and like you know, sprinkle them in here and there as we go. But other than that, let's jump to it.
Awesome. Yeah. So what are we doing today? We're gonna kind of parallel path two things. One is the first thing we're going to be doing is George is going to be building a sort of an MVP of an app that he's going to tell you about sort of live as we're in this room. And then I'm going to basically be talking over George's build, and I'm going to be kind of explaining and narrating what's going on. And I'm also going to layer in some app development concepts, basically like, what do no coders need to know about app development and code, and how is Draftbit kind of solving some of those problems? So here's what I hope you take away from this demo today. The first is that, you know, I think a lot of times in the no code space, we say that speed of building apps and the complexity of those apps are often mutually exclusive. And the first thing I want you to know is that we kind of feel like that doesn't have to be true. The second thing that I'd love for you to take away from this is that, you know, we see a lot of no coders who will build, and then publish, and they kind of will polish the tip of the pencil or sharpen the tip of the pencil forever before they ever get an app into the hands of users. And we would propose that there's a better way, which is build, publish, and then iterate. Ideally, you would want to get to publish, we would say, within the first 2 weeks of initiating your build. Today, we're going to do it within like the first 45 minutes of starting a build, just to kind of accentuate the timelines here. But what we really want to see no coders do is to publish earlier and continue iterating after you publish. The third thing I'd love for you to take away is that you maybe learn something about real core software development processes and principles that will help inform your no code journey. And then the fourth thing that I'm going to kind of layer in here is this idea of the difference between an abstraction and a reduction. What Draftbit does is we're abstracting real software development into visual development, kind of like UI, UX. So as you're building visually, you're creating real source code the way a software developer would do it. When I say, so how's it different from something that I call reduction, is basically, Draftbit is not a remix. Draftbit is like not a new take on software development. It's just a visual layer on top of software development. A reduction would be something like, okay, I built this app, but now I'm locked into the platform because their source code is in a file that can't be like, you can't extract real source code from it. there's a lot of tools like that out there, and they definitely have a time and a place. But with Draftbit, with its abstractions and the fact that you're building real source code, you're never locked into Draftbit. The source code you build is yours. You can take it out and you can continue on with it. You don't have to have a perpetual license to Draftbit in order to be able to build your app. So I just talked a bunch. These things will make more sense as we go through this. George, do you want to kind of tell them about the app that we're going to be building today and kind of how it came to be?
Yeah, sure. So for the last few days, we were thinking, or like a few weeks, we were thinking of like, oh, what should we build? What should we present to you guys? And so I wanted to, you know, you guys do like a no-code tool, like cohort. So I was like, all right, let's try to do something around like no-code tools itself as the app itself. And so I find some like a database of all the no-code tools out there, probably not all of them, but like a good amount of them. And I was like, let's do just a list, like a resource, an aggregator of all your no-code tools out there. And it's actually funny, I think is a few days in that Nick mentioned that this is, you know, essentially what Makerpad studies as. Like that's where you guys studied to do originally. So now it's much bigger than that. But so hopefully it resonate with this audience. So today, to answer your question, we're going to do like a no-code tool aggregator.
Awesome. So you all, if you gave us your email up until like an hour before this demo, you should have gotten an invite to the test flight. We've also created a user for you in the user database, and your password is test123. I'll put that in the chat. And that will allow you to log in on the login page of the app. For everyone else, George is going to kind of just quickly show you with a screen share what this app is or looks like. We're not going to spend too much time on this because we're going to try to rebuild most of it. Very secure password, yeah.
Yes, indeed. All right, should I start sharing my screen and get going?
Go for it. Yeah, go for it.
All right, sweet. Here it is. Google Chrome coming. All right, so as Nick said, let's just have a quick look at the app we built as a preparation for this. So this is what the app looks like in our builder that we're going to redo. I'm just going to preview it so you get a sense of the end result. You know, it's a simple screen with the list of categories and a list of tools that you can scroll through. And then at the bottom, you have like a tab navigator that can go to the list of the whole category or the list of all the tools. And then you can obviously kind of navigate through all of those. So go to App Builder and you see all of them. Draftbit is in there. Same thing for category. You can kind of navigate and find your way in. Same thing for tools. Oh, sorry, let me move my Zoom stuff. It's a little bit in the way. Okay, same thing for tools. And finally, for each of those tools, you can, you know, once you click on one, you not only get what category it belongs to, but you can leave a comment. So it's a very simple thing. To be able to leave a comment, you need to be able to be logged in. So we also have a logging screen. And if you log out, you have to like go back and logging again. So like maybe I'll just leave one comment so you guys can see what it looks like. Ooh. Draftbit.com. Again, your password for those we've added to the database is going to be test123. I should have shown you, but we handle like error handling as well if you type the wrong password. And now when I go to kind of my category, I can see, you know, the coolest tool ever is obviously Draftbit, and I can leave a comment here, add a comment. And we're going to say, hello, Makerpad. Okay, and it should show up at the very bottom. Here we go. So pretty simple stuff. Only, you know, work a couple of days to put together that thing. And we're going to try to reduce some of that. We're not going to do all of it, but we're going to do the core functionality today.
Hey, George, real quick.
Yeah,
real quick. Can you do two things for me? One is to hit that share project URL, and can we just generate that and we'll share it in the Zoom chat so folks can visit this app if they want to.
Yes, good idea. Here it is. If you have Expo Go installed, I might also throughout the demo show you that preview so you can see me I don't know if people are familiar with Expo Go, but you can see it live while I'm building things happening on your phone. So that might be kind of an interesting way to preview what's going on too. So feel free to install it now, and I'll pop up that QR code again a little later. It's the Expo Go app.
Thanks, George. Yeah, we had one quick question. This is, I'll get into this a little bit later, but what is on George's screen is the Draftbit builder. And then we have a simulator that's built into the builder, which is rendering a web version of this mobile app. And then we have a bunch of other tools that are available to Draftbit builders that allow you to simulate the app on iOS and Android, which are going to be like one step closer to what that test flight or that real App Store app is going to look like. There's always going to be differences between web and native mobile. That's just the nature of building a mobile app.
Yeah.
Cool. All right. So just to recap, so George has this sort of, how many hours would you say you spent on getting this app to this state, George? Like 4 or 5, including debugging and stuff like that?
Yeah, it's over the course of 3 days, but not full time. So probably 5 hours. I'm obviously pretty familiar with the tool, so it will probably take someone else a little longer, but that's the rough estimate.
So we're going to build like a very MVP version of this, not every functionality, but we're going to kind of try to rebuild this from scratch today and get it into test flight. And I'm gonna just let George take it away, and I'm gonna kind of narrate as he's going along.
All right, let's get started. Let me start my little timer. I'm curious to know how well we're doing. Okay, so this is the, I'll let you actually narrate, but I'll just start building. All right.
So again, as George is getting going, you know, what's happening here today, I guess is a big question. So what George has just done is he's created a new app in Draftbit. And I think as no coders, sometimes we take for granted what's really happening when you hit the create app button in a tool like a Draftbit or an Adalo or a Webflow. If you think about traditional software development, you want to start building a mobile app on your computer, you need to install some build tools, you need to install SDKs, you need to set up your file folder system, you need to download a simulator for your mobile app, you need to have a server, set up a server to run your APIs and a server to run your backend. There's a ton that's involved in getting an app set up. And when you hit the create app button in the Draftbit, the value that you get instantaneously from just having your entire dev environment available to you on the web instantaneously is like, for software developers is like amazing, but I think sometimes as no coders, we take that for granted a little bit. The first thing that George is doing here is he's setting up his a database of no-code tools. Basically, we purchased some data from Art at No Code Devs. It's just like a library of a bunch of no-code tools. Always need to start with data when you're building a mobile app. It's way harder to start building a mobile app without data because everything that's on your screen needs to be rendered dynamically. And if you don't have any data, everything's going to be empty. It's going to be really hard to iterate on that. So always start with data. And this happened kind of quickly, but we're making authenticated requests to Airtable. So what's going on? I'll just do like sort of a quick aside about client server relationships. Draftbit is a app client builder, and then Airtable would be like your backend or a server. And then often you also have a server that's running your APIs. Most modern no code and low code backends are going to have the APIs and the backend bundled, and they're going to serve both at the same time. What is an API? Maybe I jumped past that too quickly. An API is kind of like a messenger between the client and the server. As like a really rough metaphorical example, if you wanted to send a message to your neighbor down the street, you could either walk over there, you could send someone to walk over there, or you could make a phone call. The process of getting that information from a source to a destination is what an API does. If this sounds kind of familiar, Zapier is actually a visual development tool for what amounts to APIs. In fact, you can't spell Zapier without API. It's a little dad joke for you. If you could all laugh for me, I would really appreciate it.
I like that. It's good dad joke.
So in order to make requests from the client to the Airtable's database, we basically need a way to tell Airtable, hey, I, the app developer, own this data. And so we do that with an API key. It's a secret key. And so Airtable, we get this data, this API key from Airtable in secret, and then we save it on the client side in the app. And then whenever we ask Airtable, hey, give me the data for all these no-code tools, we pass the API key in the header of that request, and Airtable says, okay, this is the owner of this data. I'm okay to give the data back to this Draftbit app. So what George has done while I was talking is he's set up an Airtable source as a new service in his Draftbit app. He's also set up a GET request endpoint to get a list of the tools coming from Airtable. And he's set up a UI in Draftbit on the tool screen to basically return that list as a list of text components that are fed dynamically by the list of tools in Airtable. So it's just basically displaying the list of tool names on the tool screen. And now what he's done is he set up a second endpoint coming to request a single tool from Airtable. And for that request, we want to tell Airtable, I want a single tool, but I want to tell you which tool I want. And so I need to pass in a parameter for the ID of that tool. And so when I pass you the ID for the Draftbit tool, as an example, give me the Draftbit tool. If I pass you the ID for the Makerpad tool, I want the Makerpad tool back. So right now, what George is doing is now that we've got the tools, plural, and the tool singular screen set up and fed by this data, now we're creating an interaction between the two of them. So we basically need a way to navigate from the tools, plural screen to the tool singular screen. And then we also need a way to send the ID of the tool that we selected, the tools screen, to the tool singular screen, so that when you select, might want to refresh your browser, George. When you select a specific tool, you get that tool on the next page. So let's see if that worked. Boom. Okay. All right, so job one is done. We've now got an app that is pulling in tools from Airtable and allows us to display information about that tool on the next screen. Am I moving too fast or too slow for folks? I feel like I'm moving too slow because all of my notes, George is moving faster than I can talk. But you know, if folks want us to speed up or slow down, just let us know in the chat.
I think all good. Nick, Joe's just put a image of what he's seeing. I'm seeing the same thing on my phone. Is that what we're supposed to be seeing?
Let me have a look.
Yeah, so I can comment on that. So because we're doing everything so fast, the latest version we post multiple version in test flight, and they haven't been all approved yet. So we did an over-the-air update, which is also an amazing thing. Maybe we'll cover a little later. But if you kind of close the app and restart it, it should pick up those new over-the-air update, and you should see the new version. The new version will be what you see by default when it's approved in, like, I don't know, 24 hours or something like that. If it were a real app, we will obviously not do everything in such a short time frame, so you will not experience that. But let me know if you close it all and reopen it all, and if you see something, if you still see something, let me know.
Awesome. Looks like it's worked now. Yeah, so this whole process is basically just mapping everything that's in your database to a front end and making it look like and feel like a real app. Well, it is, but I mean, actually putting that data as like an actual screen, people can touch, click, see lists, see the names, etc. Right?
Correct. Yeah, we're starting with a blank canvas. I'll try to answer a few of the questions that were asked here. There's a question about how much control do you have over UI? An uncomfortably large amount is the answer to that question.
That's a good way to say it.
Draftbit does have a bunch of pre-built, we call them like bits and blocks. They're primitive and more robust, like out of the box components that you can add to your app screen. But maybe when George has a second, you can click on a component and show the styles panel, like for a text component. You basically have access to every style and every prop of every component that you add to a Draftbit app, all the way down to the lowest possible level that the programming language allows. We like to say that anything that you can do, that a developer can do in code, you can do in Draftbit. So if you're used to no code tools that kind of give you these higher order, like full width blocks of UI elements, this might seem like it's really primitive and basic. Like, why is everything black and white? Why isn't there margin and padding and things like that? Just know that we're not going to do a ton of style today, because perfecting the UI is honestly one of the most time consuming processes of building an app. And honestly, it goes against kind of the ethos that I mentioned earlier on about get something really basic out there first and then refine it and iterate it. So just know that to go from what we're doing today to maybe the test flight version that you have on your phones to maybe something that looks super high end and production grade, you would iterate through that. You would continue to refine your UI as you build. In general, I tend to not be comfortable comparing Draftbit to other tools in this space, but one thing I do feel very comfortable saying is that Draftbit gives you more UI control than any other mobile app builder that's out there right now. There's another question about, can you save data within a Draftbit database without using an API, kind of like you do in Bubble? Martin, good question. So by now you're probably sensing that Draftbit is, what Draftbit really is in technical terms is it's a backend agnostic front-end builder. So you bring your own backend to Draftbit, whereas Bubble is an all-in-one tool. You have to use their built-in database and APIs. And so while it may feel like what you're doing in a Bubble app is you're submitting some data or you're updating some data in Bubble without making an API request, you actually are doing the same thing in Bubble. You are making an API request. Just because it all lives within Bubble, you don't really see that API request. They abstract that away or maybe reduce that away from you so that you don't necessarily feel like you're programming an API request. But you absolutely are. It's the same thing. So we're going to get in this demo to how you would maybe submit some data to the server pretty soon here, and we'll show you what that looks like.
Yeah, I was actually just about to go to adding comments. So right now we do have kind of the just back and forth between the, sorry if I go here, between the whole list and the individual tools. And for some of them, when there is a category, we also show that category, which was kind of a double nested fetch to get that information from a table. And now I'm about to add comments. And for that, I'll let Nick explain a little bit more, but we're going to use a different backend, which is also very interesting.
Yeah, so this demo really showcases the power of, maybe I just do a quick aside about APIs and HTTP requests and things like that. So just pull up my notes here. So if you guys are familiar with like HTTP and URLs and things like that, like what does that all mean, or like what does that mean for my no code journey? So HTTP is a protocol for sending documents back and forth on the web. So as an example, or most often between a client and a server. And then a URL is just an HTTP resource that describes the information that you want from the server. And then HTTP verbs or methods, HTTP methods, describe what you want to do with that data. So I want to get that data. I want to post or send that data. I want to delete that data on the server. I want to patch or update that data on the server. Those are all HTTP methods. And then REST, which is kind of the de facto HTTP principles or design just makes doing these requests really simple for app developers. There's other types of HTTP designs out there like SOAP or like GraphQL, but REST is really the primary one. And Draftbit will support any API, any REST API that you want to bring to it, which encompasses basically every tool that you want out there. So Airtable's REST APIs are very good, very robust, and that's how we're accessing data from Airtable. Xano, same thing, which is what George is setting up now. Their REST APIs are phenomenal. Why is this important? Well, we're setting up actually 2 servers with this Draftbit app. Airtable is kind of the data source for what I would consider to be like global or public data. So all of these no-code tools, even if a user was logged out, you would still want them to be able to see the data that Airtable is returning. It's not user-specific data. It's not like information about your profile or your username. It's not comments that are attributed to you. I really think, you use the tool that serves the purpose. For any tool where you're like building a marketplace or an aggregator, or you have a bunch of information that's publicly available or that you want to be available publicly, Airtable is a phenomenal tool for that because it's relatively static. Maybe you're running some web scrapers and you're constantly adding to your list of tools and growing it over time, just like Makerpad is growing their list of tools that they list over time. But you don't need like a bespoke back end for this type of data because Airtable makes it really easy to administer that stuff. You can imagine you have like an admin on your team who's responsible for cleaning up the data. You'd rather have them doing that in Airtable where they can edit that data visually than doing it in like a back end where maybe you have to update the data using some SQL queries and stuff like that. Contrastingly, George has now connected Xano, right? I think you have, George, you've connected Xano to Draftbit. Xano is a highly performant no code or low code backend that is super powerful, handles user authentication, is secure, is flexible. And for the app's functionality where you want to give users the ability to log in or sign up, store a password securely, authenticate them securely, leave comments that are attributed to them, things like that. You would want to go with a real app backend like a Xano. Other tools in the Xano family are things like Backendless, Supabase, Firebase, and other things like that. We personally love using Xano at Draftbit. It's similar to Draftbit in that it's very flexible, very performant, but also appeals to no and low coders. So what George has done while I was talking is he set up a UI in the app to display comments that users are leaving on specific tools in the app. So you log in, you click add comment, you leave a comment, and that comment gets added to the tool in which you leave it on. I'm going to pause and try and scan the chat for questions that came up while I was talking. George was building.
And those
you've not.
Sorry.
I know, right? You've not done auth yet, right, George?
No. So I just displayed a list of all the comments for a given tool. So we do pass like the parameter for the tool. So those are only the comment for Draftbit. But what I haven't done is the ability to leave a comment, which will be interesting because we'll have to identify the user if we want to do that. So that's coming up next. Right now, it's just going to quickly illustrate the custom code a little bit.
Oh yeah, let's do this. So we mentioned, maybe I didn't mention it actually, I'll mention it now. So Draftbit has a bunch of abstractions that are already built in, and all these abstractions are real app components and functions and things like this. They're all written in the way that a software developer would write them. We call this the esoteric app problem. We can't possibly anticipate every single nuanced thing that you would want to do with your app, or that someone may in the future want to do with the app. And so a hallmark of any low code tool is that you make it flexible enough to allow people to do things custom with code that maybe we haven't built an abstraction for yet. So in this case, we haven't built a function that allows you to transform dates into friendlier formats of dates. What George just did is he wrote a really simple custom function that he used with the transform with on a variable, and basically transform the date from an unreadable format into a slightly more readable format. And you could, in theory, make that format whatever you want with your code. So we're not going to, that's probably the extent of the custom code we're going to show you today, but you should know that you can do some really complex stuff between installing packages, installing writing custom functions, or writing your own custom components with Draftbit. We've seen some really complex stuff done.
Hey, Nick, are you using the Airtable API to showcase like the public data, and you're using Xano for like the user data? Is that correct?
For the user data and any authenticated user data. So as an example, the comments are stored in Xano, and they are attributed to the tool in Airtable, right? And they're married with the ID of that tool. So maybe George can show in the, can you show George real quick in the comments table in Xano, how a comment is attributed to a tool?
Yeah, so we just saved the tool ID. That is actually the ID that's coming from Airtable. So that's how we connect those two backends.
Yeah, so every Airtable record has a record ID. So that's how they're in.
Yeah.
And then I guess that leads to my next question of, you can have multiple databases at one time plugged into Draftbit. Is there a limit on that? Or maybe does it depend on the plan, or how does that work?
You theoretically can connect unlimited services and unlimited endpoints to Draftbit. There's no limits on that stuff. I don't know what an app developer would say about how many you would really ideally want, right? But there are folks who are building apps in Draftbit that are like 100, 150 screens. They have 10 plus services connected to their app, 50 plus endpoints. And certainly you're eventually going to have trade-offs between performance, but the beauty of doing this in a way that is sort of core app development principles is that we get asked a lot about like scale. What does scalability mean? At the end of the day, I think scalability simply means like, is the sort of like the core or the foundation of your app simple enough that as you add more traffic, more data to it, that it can handle that. And I think that Draftbit sort of excels in that space.
Yeah, absolutely. Someone asked about, what do you need to publish an app to the App Store? Is there a certain plan that you need for that? And if you don't sign up for that plan, what are your options for publishing the app? Can you do like a PWA or what? Yeah,
so we're not going to cover PWAs today, but you can publish like a Draftbit hosted PWA on the starter plan. But you basically on the pro, what you should know about the pro plan is that you, or rather the starter plan is there's two things you cannot do on the starter plan. One is you can't take your code out of Draftbit in any way, which includes publishing to the App Store. The second thing you can't do on the starter plan is you can't have collaborators on your team. So the pro plan is really for folks who want to publish and teams. And again, like kind of back to the premise of this talk, we would say publish as soon as possible. We do have monthly versions of the pro plans that are more affordable, but I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to float you guys a Makerpad discount to the pro plan. I'll figure that out after this. We want to make it really affordable. We don't want price to be a barrier to people publishing, but at the end of the day, like that source code is super valuable and we've got to charge something for it, right?
Totally.
We do give you a lot of other tools to kind of test and iterate inside of Draftbit, but again, we really want you to get to publish as soon as possible. So what George is doing right now is he's basically setting up user auth. So we're going to do just login today. In maybe a future version of this app, we also have this, we would create sign up. We're not going to create sign up today just because it takes a little bit of time and it's not part of our MVP. So anyone who gave us their email and who got the test flight app, your email is already in the user table of this app. And then that password is test123. And you can log into the app on your test flight and start leaving comments and things like that. So that functionality is already available to you. What George is doing is, let's talk about authentication for a second. So previously, when we did a flavor of authentication with Airtable, where basically we said, I, the app developer, own this Airtable data, and we passed an API key to Airtable to verify that, hey, the app has access to all of the data in the Airtable. We're doing sort of a second type of authentication here, where now we're saying, I, the client, so this instance of the app that is running on this device, on behalf of the user who is logged in, has access to this data in Xano. So it's like a little bit of nuance. I'll just repeat it again. That with Airtable, we're authenticating that I, the app developer, own this data globally. With a login, what we're saying is I, the app that's running on this phone, just this instance of the application running on this device, on behalf of the user who's logged in, has access to this data, which in this case is comments that we're leaving on, or the ability to comment. We're actually letting everyone see every comment in the app, which is pretty standard UX. But the ability to leave a comment attributed to you is an authenticated request that we're sending to Xano. And so what's important to understand about that is when we have something like a secure login, what's going on behind the scenes. One is the first thing we're doing is we're setting up an action to send an email and a password, just 2 strings, to Xano with a button. And we're saying, hey, Xano, I'm sending an authentication request to you, like log me in. And then Xano is going to compare that to the data that it has on the server, and it's going to send a response back to say either invalid, so it's going to send an error, or it's going to say valid, and here's the response. And the response comes back in something called a JSON object. And so what Draftbit needs to do is take that JSON object, parse it as JSON, extract the key that authenticates the user, and save that key in the app. And so then what ends up happening is that key gets saved for the user, and now I can use that key in any request that I make to Xano. Am I explaining that properly, by the way, George?
Yeah, and I apologize, I was not focusing on the right screen as you were saying, but everything Nick just mentioned is essentially this action stack. So you do like one step after the other, call your backend, and then pass the response, get the key, save that key. And so we have those bricks, very like minimal bricks that you can assemble to do anything you want, as opposed to, different approaches would be to have just one big brick that does logging to Airtable, but we've chosen to kind of give you all the tools you can assemble and ideally do like, more things with it. So that's the example of that action stack Nick was talking about.
Yeah, so all of these actions to make the request, receive the response, parse the JSON, extract the key, save that key as a global variable are all, we call this like Draftbit's version of no code off, meaning you didn't have to dip into code to do any of this stuff. If for some reason you had a really exotic server response on your login request, and it was like the Draftbit's like no code actions weren't able to let you extract the key, you could always write a custom function and add that as an action in your stack to handle the more exotic use cases. But we come across those very rarely, if ever. And so what's happened now is George now has an app built in Draftbit in, I don't know, 30 minutes or so, where a user can basically, as long as they have a user account in Xano's table, which many of you do, can log into this app, can go to a tool, can leave a comment, and then when you navigate back, that comment shows up in the tool. And we've done it purely from scratch. One thing that we haven't really done, George, maybe when you get a second, is to kind of show the source code.
Oh yeah. Goodness.
So what George is showing you right now is all of the source code that is for this screen specifically. And then if you wanted the source code for the entire app, you would hit that export app button and it would download this really nice bundled repository of your entire app. Again, like I can't emphasize enough, Draftbit cares a lot about code quality, code portability. It's 100% based on open source languages and libraries. Ideally, if you're not the technical member on your software development team, your technical software development teammate could, should you have one, would look at that and say something along the lines of, yep, I can work with this.
That's pretty amazing.
I was just going to show the conditional display to toggle between the ability to add a comment if you're already logged in, or the ability to log in if you're not, and if you want to add a comment. So I don't know if you wanted to comment on that.
Yes. So George, so we have a feature called Conditional Display. You can kind of think about it as like one version of state management. So basically, we're going to choose to show or hide components based on some app state. In this case, is the user authenticated, i.e. is there an auth token present and saved in the app, yes or no? So if yes, we display add a comment. If no, we display log in to add a comment. And so in this way, you can kind of, yep, so there you go. So add a comment. And if the user was logged out, in this case, which is a little bit, I think maybe a little bit hard to simulate, then it would display login to add a comment. Yep.
I'll quickly do a log out so we can show that.
I'm going to try and scroll back through this chat and see if there are other questions.
So one of the questions was, how does Draftbit handle responsiveness across different sizes and devices?
Love that question. Who asked that question? Give yourself a pat on the back. So in app development land, so Draftbit is exporting source code in a version of JavaScript called React Native. React is a library that was developed by Facebook. If you think about Facebook's challenge being a massive global platform is appearance of like the core Facebook experience on, not exaggerating, thousands or tens of thousands of different types of devices and browsers and things like that. So they needed a way to control their UI across all these different, it needed to be responsive to all these different types of devices. And so React Native is the mobile permutation of React. So the React Native responsiveness engine is driven by something called Flex or Flexbox. And Flexbox is kind of like, if you're used to Webflow, it's kind of like the box model a little bit. But basically it allows you to define at a very low level. You can either do things like say, I want this to take up 50% of the screen width, no matter how wide or narrow the screen is. But you can also do more powerful things, like you can define ratios between components on the screen. So you can say things like, I want this to have a 1:10 ratio. Maybe it's like a little icon, and you don't want it to get super big as the screen gets big. Or maybe I want this to have a 9:10 ratio. So regardless of how wide the screen gets, this is going to expand. You can get really, really fine grained with Flexbox, and Draftbit gives you both simple and advanced flavors of Flex that you can control. So I know that's like kind of a conceptual answer. Flex being very powerful also can be sometimes intimidating. The beauty of Draftbit is that as you're building visually and as you're tweaking and iterating visually, you're getting immediate feedback from the Draftbit UI and from the simulator on your device that here is how this one tiny style change that you made appears on this device. And so you can envision a world where maybe you have a couple of different testing devices in front of you. You can see how a style change impacts your app on multiple different types of devices, iOS, Android. You can even do iPad, tablet apps with React Native. So if you ran Expo on your tablet, you could see what your design changes would look like on a tablet. And Flex governs all of that. So in that way, you can get really responsive. Someone may be wondering, can you build desktop or browser apps with Draftbit? The answer to that is like kind of technically yes, but we wouldn't advise it. There's lots of really good web app builders out there. And while Draftbit does export web compatible source code, we're hyper focused on mobile right now. And I'd love to point you in the direction of some really good web tools. I think I also saw a question about, can I do my web app on Bubble and my Draftbit app or my mobile app on Draftbit? One really cool thing about Bubble is that I think on some of their higher tier plans, you get API access. So you can actually use a Bubble backend, including their APIs, including their auth server and all the other stuff. And you can use it as a backend for any other app. We actually have a guide that we published on how to use a Bubble backend for a Draftbit app. So that's like an option that we would totally advise if you wanted to keep your web app and you wanted to get into mobile.
That's awesome. Do you guys have like an app library where people can get like, out of the box components like a audio player or like a gallery component and so on?
Those things are actually just built right into the component library. So when George has a break, I'll have him kind of just open up the component library and show you a few of the things that are available out of the box. And then so we've got, simple things like views and text, carousels, image background, icon, button, star rating, which is like a component that allows you to assign like a value of up to 5 stars, sliders, just like a bunch of things that we've built. We have our component library is open source. I think we call it Jigsaw. And because it's open source, it also means that in theory, the developer community or you all can submit pull requests to that library to add components to it that you would want to see available in Draftbit, and we can like merge those PRs and stuff like that. So we would hope that, I think the Draftbit's approach would be that over time, that component library starts simple and gets better over time as user contributions start coming in. If neither of those things are available, you can also write your own custom components. So let's say your app has this really exotic map view that displays the map pins in tie-dye and does all this really crazy shit. You could hire someone, or you could write yourself. If you know code, you could write that component and add it as a custom code component into Draftbit, and it'll just work. And you can pass props into it, you can get data out of it, and it just will function like any other component in your app. So again, in this way, Draftbit's principled in that we would give you the building blocks to start, and then we would hope that you would add your customizations over time, maybe using code or maybe not.
Do you offer the functionality of push notifications or GPS, or if you were on a map, could you click a button to show the distance between you and that location?
Sure. So one of the beauties of building for native is that you get access to all of device libraries out of the box. And so things like access to the phone's camera roll, access to the phone's GPS sensors, access to the phone's camera, access to push notifications, you have access to those things just by virtue of being installed on a user's device. Depending on the complexity of what you are trying to do with the phone's libraries, you may or may not need to dip into custom code in order to access some of those more complex things. So the short answer is yes. And the long answer is yes, but some things are more low code than no code. And the way that we have chosen to solve the problem of what can I and can't I do with Draftbit is we've got a really thriving user community who are constantly working on ways to do things at Draftbit that honestly we've never even anticipated that you can do. And we would invite you all to, either ask questions in that community or as you solve for something in Draftbit that's really cool, write a quick little tutorial and we'll give you credit for it in our tutorial section in our community.
If someone exports their code and then makes some changes to it outside of Draftbit, are they on their own if they want to go back to Draftbit and continue working on that code now that they've changed it outside of the platform?
So today, yes, if you modify your code outside of Draftbit, you can't port those modifications into Draftbit. We're working on ways to solve that. And actually, interestingly, one of the things that we've learned that users do a ton of is like, let's say like the CTO of the app will often feel comfortable getting things working in code outside of Draftbit and then simply implementing those things in the Draftbit app through a combination of our abstractions and our custom code features. So as an example, we had a user recently who was trying to get, I don't know if you all are familiar with Segment, but Segment is like a application analytics tool that captures the events that your users perform and sends it somewhere so you can understand user journeys, what parts of the app are getting the most use, things like that, so you can improve the product over time. Segment is a really tricky thing, potentially impossible thing to implement in a no-code app, but in Draftbit, it's simply a matter of adding a custom code component to every screen in your app and telling, I'm oversimplifying a little bit, you install the Segment package in the root directory of your app, but you basically just, with custom code, tell Segment, hey, when a user clicks this button on the screen, log an event. And so the developer first kind of did a bare bones version of that outside of Draftbit. Once they understood how Segment worked in React Native apps, then they just implemented it in Draftbit. And in this particular case, I think they had come from Adalo to Draftbit, and they said the Adalo implementation took like upwards of a month and they still had not finished it. And in Draftbit, they were able to get this working in a matter of hours. So again, Draftbit is the pro code, no code mobile app builder, right? And what we really hope you take away from this is that no code is a means to an end, but also code is a means to an end, and they relate to one another, and they should, 1 + 1 = 3, I guess, in this scenario. I know based on going through this with George that we're getting very close to having something that we want to get into test flight. So just because it is the top of the hour, George is just doing a little bit of testing and debugging to make sure everything works the way he wanted it to.
Yeah, for the rest of you, oops, sorry, I didn't interrupt. Go ahead.
Go ahead.
I was just gonna say, for those who've been following, I've been running into a little bit of an issue posting the comment, and if you pay attention, you will see that's also kind of a good thing about Draftbit. Like with there's a way, you can save the response you get, and then you can display that error message to the user. So I've been able to essentially debug by like showing stuff in the UI as the user will experience them. So that's kind of, again, if you've been following, that's the process I'm going through right now. Hopefully I'll get that fixed in a minute.
I didn't.
Sorry, go ahead.
Go ahead, Amy.
One question we had, and I'm assuming given everything you said about how flexible the platform is, that the answer is yes. But if you don't publish to the App Store and you want to go the PWA route, can you still monetize it? So could you integrate Stripe or something into your app without going to the App Store?
Yeah, monetization. So yeah, the answer is yes. Monetization, So not surprisingly, if you are following some of the App Store sagas that have played out over the years, in particular, like Apple is very mother henny about how you can make money with your app. They want to make sure they can take a cut and other things. And so if you want things like in-app purchases, the sort of like white hat way, there are libraries and implementations, and there is probably a little bit of custom code that's involved in making your app sort of in-app purchase eligible. I think there may also be some things that you have to register with the, I may be wrong about this, maybe it just comes along with your developer certificate, but there are like authorizations you need to secure to say, hey, like my app is charging people. If you wanted to charge people on the web with a PWA, it's a little bit more open-ended, and it's just it's a different implementation than it would be if you wanted in-app purchases in the App Store. You can really think about it as like two completely different things. But yeah, either way, you're not, Draftbit's not limiting you, just the implementations vary like pretty significantly. So you should decide if you want, you would not be able to iterate from web to native and maintain your same in-app purchase implementation. You kind of need to like destroy it and rebuild it. So you should think about the destination before implementing any sort of monetization in your app.
Super helpful.
So as George is debugging and as we're sort of getting to the end of like the build version of this, what we're going to do next is we're going to kind of simplify there was a lot of behind the scenes or like pre-work that was done to get approved to push apps into test flight. You need an Apple developer certificate that can take weeks or months, and you have to pay for it. You have to, the first version of your app always goes through a more rigorous approval process from Apple. And so we didn't want to push a V1 live because we have no control over how long Apple will take to approve that in test flight. So what we're going to do is Draftbit provides tools and services for folks who kind of get stuck in the publishing phase. We really don't want you to get stuck in the publishing phase. But what we're going to do today is once we feel like this app is in a decent state, we're going to actually export it and then publish what is called an over-the-air update to an existing test flight build. So basically what we're going to do is we're going to tell Apple, hey, this is a new version of the No Code Tools app. It has the same slug and the same, we're going to increment the version. And if all goes according to plan, which in the publishing to App Store land is not like a guarantee, then when you guys like close and open your app back up, you should just have this version of the app on your phone, replacing the more polished version. And then we can always like replace and go back to the better version. Does that make sense? I don't know if I explained that properly.
Yeah, I think so.
Cool.
Or at least make them.
Just to comment. So I was able to fix the issue. I was essentially just missing the bearer kind of prefix for the authentication token, which is a classic mistake. Anyway, so now I'm able to show the comment and say, add a new one to that specific item, and I believe it shows up here. So as Nick said, we're going to stop here in terms of like developing the tool. We can navigate from categories to tools, login, add a comment, and things like that. So now I want to illustrate how when we have something we feel a little bit comfortable with, how do we do that publication? Nick, do you want me show all the GitHub stuff like right now? Do you want more introduction, or should I just keep going?
Yeah, why don't you take the code out of Draftbit and just kind of explain at a high level, like what this, like we're getting into software dev land a little bit, like GitHub, you probably heard of that. It's a software development concept or tool, but maybe not explain every single step, but just like high level what we're kind of accomplishing here.
Cool. So yeah, in hopefully less than 5 minutes, we have an application Draftbit in a state that's working a little bit. Obviously, we want to make it prettier and everything, but we have something. how do we go from here to have something people can play on with the phone? So we have two ways to do that in Draftbit. You can export all your code. We're going to send you an email. You're going to download your file and all that. That's one way. We have a new way to do it, which integrate directly with GitHub. So that's very convenient because you can keep pushing your changes and you get all that like version control in GitHub built in. So that's what I want to demonstrate here. So I'm going to close all those like Xano and Airtable and all of that because we're not going to do more kind of development right now. And I'm going to set up my GitHub integration. So all I need is a repo, specific branch and a token. I'll talk about that in a sec. So if I go to GitHub under a Draftbit account, I'm going to create one that's code tools. I think we have already fortunately have one. I'm going to delete this one that way. I don't want to mess up the names. Delete. It doesn't matter. Never mind. I'll just create a new one. No
So
code.
this is just one flavor of taking your app out of Draftbit, right? Saving it to GitHub is a really developer grade solution to getting your app into a super safe place where you can collaborate on it, things like that. Another way is just to simply download it. And if you download it to your desktop, you can do things like run it locally and other things. If you run it locally, you can do things like run some command line terminals and create the binaries that you can upload into the App Store yourself. There's like a bunch of different routes once you have your code outside of Draftbit.
Okay, so now I can commit something. So now I can do my first commit to that GitHub repo that I just set up. And here it is. So if I go have a look, this is all the code. And at the risk of emphasizing that too much, this is literally all you need for your app. There is no secret stuff. We're not holding on anything. We're not holding back. So like, you can take that and run with it and publish and do whatever you want. This is your all React Native app right there in those files. So in my case, what I'm going to do is now that it's in GitHub, I'm going to clone it locally. I'm going to put it on my laptop. I'm going to maybe, I might have to share differently. I'm not sure you can. Let me reshare my screen so you can see my whole desktop. Here we go. Okay, so now I'm sure be able to clone that new repository. And cloning just mean that I'm getting it locally, right? I know I call it Makerpad. Here we go. That's the name. Okay. So here it is, the latest version. All you need to do now, so that part is still, you have literally like 3 command line to type. There is no UI for it yet. We rely on what the great folks at Expo are providing us, which is a way to, in like 3 lines of code, like 3 command line commands to turn your app into something you can publish. So those, all you have to do is just first like locate where it is on your machine. And so that's where it is. That's where mine is for those who remember. And then all I need to do is install it. That's going to take about like a minute. And once you're done installing it, you can run emulators. You can, like see what it looks like on your machine, see what it looks like on the web. You can do a bunch of stuff with it. We're going to essentially skip all those steps and rush to the store in a couple of minutes. So I'm only going to show how you take that project, make a build, and then submit that build to the Apple App Store, as well as the Android, like Google Play Store. It should not be too long. I think it's really pretty fast, just a minute.
Yeah, if you're a coder, you're probably super comfortable in command line interfaces, and if you're a no coder like myself, you're probably like seasick watching this. I would just mention that, like, I said this before and I'll say it again, like Draftbit is super helpful when it comes to helping you in this particular step. we're working on ways to basically abstract this part of the publishing process. We have managed services and things to help you get through this. It's not as daunting as it looks. If you can follow a tutorial, you can do this. But if you're scared off or nervous about Draftbit because this part seems intimidating, don't let it be. Let us help you. This should not be what prevents you from investing time in Draftbit.
So you see me run that first command. Well, the very first one was to install it. And then the second command out of 3 command line is just build. So you're just saying build as an iOS for the iOS platform. So if it's your first time doing it, it'll walk you through a couple of things you have to do. But essentially, the more you do it, like hopefully, as you can see here, it should be fairly straightforward. Okay, so here we are. Like it went through, the build is in process. We can see what it looks like in Expo. That part takes a little bit longer, so that might take a few minutes. So we're not going to wait for all of that, but you see like it's being built right now. So we're going to wait for that. We'll share that when it's done. An interesting thing is that in parallel, we can do the exact same thing for no, go Makerpad. We can do the exact same thing for Android. So platform Android, and it should be as not submit. Sorry, build. Submit is going to be so that we'll see how far that goes. I'm gonna have to create a new key store again. I don't quite want to spend too much time with that because really that's going to take a little bit of time. What I want to try to do is while this is sending the proper submission process, I want to try something a little bit different, which is to over the air, like without submitting a new build, like can I just update an existing build? So we're cheating a little bit just so hopefully my goal is that you guys can see in the app you've been trying since the beginning and see the new version. We'll see if that works. That'll be interesting test. So what I should be able to do is just publish, and I should publish over the air. Let's see if that works.
Again, while this is going, like I can't emphasize enough how like vastly simplified a lot of this stuff is made over traditional like iOS and Android app development. This is stuff that 2, 3, 4 years ago, anyone who was building for mobile would not believe this is possible.
Oof, you should hear the fan. My laptop is gonna, you should hear the fan of my laptop. It's gonna get on fire. There's a lot of thing happening. Yeah, what I am hoping to demonstrate is this one. If we can just hopefully get to the end of that, this one we can just skip for now.
Maybe a little bit of, I love it from the folks who have stuck with us for this hour plus, just a little bit of feedback, like how do you feel, maybe you can just leave some comments in the chat, like how do you feel about no code, low code, pro code, like how do you feel about Draftbit relative to maybe when we started? I'm just trying to like get a sense for like, do you feel inspired? Do you feel intimidated? Do you feel like maybe this is not right for you, or maybe you weren't even aware that something like this existed? I just kind of want to know, was this useful? Did we scare you? Did we excite you? Whatever. And then also maybe let us know like, what kind of discount do y'all want? Because I'm going to generate those after this talk and we'll send them to you.
Looks like people are finding it inspiring, exciting, useful, informative.
Super appreciate those comments. Thank you all. The first time I've seen Builder mentioned. I don't know a ton about Builder, but I really like how I think is Builder full React? Are they basically a React builder? I'm not sure. I'm not 100% sure
I can't
exactly what their value
remember,
prop is.
yeah, what they are, but I would say that Builder is like maybe a little step further in the whole abstraction. What was the other word you used? Abstraction and
I use the word reduction, but
okay,
there's some
reduction. So
controversy.
it's even more like flexible with the coding. So I would say if you master Draftbit, then Builder will probably be your next challenge in terms of the interface and how you set things up. But it's not, you can build web apps and mobile apps, but I don't think it's as focused on mobile as I would say Draftbit is, if that makes sense.
Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, I need to play with Builder. I just continue to hear nothing but positive things about what they're doing. And it sounds like they're doing things. They have a similar ethos to how Draftbit thinks about stuff.
Yeah.
Let's see. Chris is asking about, do we have tutorials for Draftbit and Xano? The answer to that is hell yeah. We have a lot of stuff on Draftbit and Xano. It's probably the backend that we cover the most with our tutorials. So those can all be found in the Draftbit community when you sign up. And if there's anything you're missing, we almost certainly can help you close any gaps. We also have, by the way, maybe I'll just paste this in the chat. In the Draftbit documentation site, which is separate from the community, we have a section called REST API integrations, and we basically have step-by-step guides for setting up Draftbit with many of the most popular backends, including Xano, including Airtable. So that's if you're starting with a backend, if you've got a WordPress CMS or a Bubble CMS, even a Webflow CMS, you can connect those things to Draftbit with REST.
I can give a little update because we have something that works, which is very exciting. So again, just to summarize everything, if you look at my screen, we have a proper build that is going to the iOS, to the App Store. So it's going to take a few minutes. It's going to get approved. Like hopefully it's going to get approved and all that. That's what you want to do for a professional app. On the window in the middle, that was me kind of over the air changing the app that you all tried at the very beginning. So if you now close that app that you tried and reopen it, you should see the version that we just worked on during this hour. So another way to say that is like in an hour and 1 minute since I started the build, we now have a legit kind of update on TestFlight, an app on TestFlight that you can play with. And that's pretty exciting.
That's awesome. So if George, if someone wants to access this, I think you can open your TestFlight app and you force close it and then reopen it, and it should.
Yeah,
in theory work.
Over the air update, it needs to be reclosed and reopened because it's going to recheck if there is an update. So do that, and then everybody was in the spreadsheet that Amy sent around should have access. Everybody who installed that TestFlight through the link I shared at the very beginning, the TestFlight link that I shared at the very beginning of this presentation, should have access to it. And if you load it again, I don't know how much people can see on my screen, but like you can tap on things. You see the title. I can even try to add a comment. Like all of that is what we just did now under kind of an app on my iPhone. Just in 1 hour.
Awesome.
Pretty good.
It's awesome.
Yeah,
no big deal. Just an hour.
Yeah. That's great.
We'll leave that up for a little bit, right, George? And maybe we want to publish back over it with the better version of the app just for demo purposes. But we'll get everyone else who maybe gave us their email later. We'll get you the TestFlight, and we'll get you a user account in the user table, and your password will be test123. But definitely invite you to do this yourself in Draftbit. And I'll work through Amy to get you guys a a handsome discount on Draftbit, and hopefully you all can use it for your learning. Give it like another 30 seconds for other questions or comments that roll in, but otherwise I think we're done. And I just want to really say thank you to Amy. Thank you, Ben, for having us and letting us show off this tool. It means a lot. And yeah, we're really excited to see what you all build with Draftbit.
Yeah, thank you so much for, again, taking the time to put this together and for demoing this. I know that's a lot of pressure to do all of this live, so great job. I mentioned in the chat that we wanted to do this session today because our next project for next week is mobile apps. So I wanted to give everyone a chance to dive into Draftbit and kind of learn the basics and get something going. So if you're interested in using Draftbit for your mobile app project, I would definitely get started. And maybe if you guys want to collaborate as an option too, we could host like a gather meetup for those that are interested in starting their mobile app project with Draftbit, and we can kind of learn how to do it together. So if that would be interesting to any of you guys, you can put your interest in the Slack channel and we can figure a time out for that. But otherwise, thank you, Nick. Thank you, George. This was awesome. And yeah, I'll let you guys know what the deal is to get access to Draftbit after this.
Sounds good. Thank you all.
Thank you all. Have a great rest of your day.
Bye, everyone.
Bye, everyone.
Bye, guys.